Today we've got a very interesting presentation for you where we get into the actual categories of visions that a psychonaut is likely to have when using the techniques described in this channel. And just as a reminder, if you're a new viewer, you can go back and watch the introductory video to figure out how to have these kinds of visions yourself. But a really brief summary is: you close your eyes in a dark room, you search the back of your eyelid for patterns and visions and colors, and you learn to project those patterns and visions and colors out into full 3D immersion type movies that play on the back of your closed eyelids of the spirit realm, astral plane, mental plane, whatever you want to call it. It's probably all of those things combined. But today our presentation is entitled Apparitions on the Astral Plane, Astral Beings Who Occasionally Enter Visions. And so here on the next slide, I'll just let you get a look at this particular astral being of the class luminescent, multicolored face Specter that I saw not more than a couple weeks ago on the back of my closed eyelids while I was attempting to have the traditional type of psychonautic images. And I will tell you on this channel when I use AI, so this actual Specter, though I wish I would have drawn it, I didn't. It's an AI image, but what I did do is I colored the face of the AI image so that it looked like what I saw. So what I did on this particular image is I painted the colors on the face. And it's actually a really good representation of what I saw. Maybe what I saw was a little skinnier. And it was also, well, no, that's a good representation, but I'll tell you more about it here in a second. So we head to the next slide. And so this is what I will call a being class. It's a class of beings. And as I mentioned, the name I gave to this particular being class is luminescent multicolored face Specter. It's tough to come up with names for all the beings I see. I see a lot of different beings, so sometimes I'm just kind of literal, so I just called it a multicolored face Specter, basically. And that's what it was. Like, it was this being you see here didn't really have a face. It kind of looked like what you see there, but it had like a swirl of color where the face would be, and I got a really good look at that face because it essentially pressed its face right up against my face, like on the back of my closed eyelids. Like, I saw it from this close and then it floated away. But anyway, I'll tell you about the vision. So, well, one thing first. The thing about these beings is, hold on a second, let me get in the right frame of mind. Talking about spiritual things, so I tend to get in a spiritual state of mind. And as long as there's not a lot of viewers watching these videos, I don't mind doing this. When there's more viewers, I don't know if I will, because I don't want to get like a strike or something. And for me, it doesn't take a lot. It just takes a puff or two to really build up my spiritual energy and vibration. If I do that for a week or two, these sorts of visions just start to come out of me without any effort on my part, really. But as I mentioned in a lot of the earlier videos, it is absolutely not necessary to use something like this. You can just do it with your mind alone, but this does speed up the process. But remember, we're talking about microdosing. You don't even need to take enough to feel it. In fact, it may be counterproductive to take any more than microdosing, because all you're really trying to do is build up your spiritual energy. And you won't really feel that happening. Like, you'll know when it's happened when you start having these visions appear on the back of your closed eyelids without any effort when you close your eyes. So how did the vision go? Well, I was sitting, I think I was lying back on my bed. I was attempting to have a vision session. And as I've mentioned before, I can get 16 to 20 visions in a night or more, depending on how well it's going and how fast the visions are flowing. And even within those visions, I can have hundreds of visions. Like, if I'm traveling across an alien landscape in my mind, like, I'll literally see hundreds of different things. There's no way I can remember it all. But occasionally, well, it would be best to start with the being classes. well, I'll just tell you what happened. So then I'll go to the being classes. So this video isn't going as smoothly as I'd like it to, but that'll happen sometimes. So I'm sitting there in a dim room with my eyes closed. I think I actually put on some eye shades this time to make it a little darker. And I didn't get a traditional kind of vision, which is like a 3D immersion movie script. Instead, I got what I call a being class, and it's also it's a class of visions, the being class visions, and it's also like just a class of entities or something. But so there's different vision classes and there's different being classes, and but the being class itself is a specific type of vision where I literally will have a being show up right on the back of my closed eyelids, and it will literally just float around and kind of act of its own volition. It's the coolest thing. It's so cool the first time you see one of these things, and I've seen a number of these being classes or these beings of different types. Not this particular type, but apparitions and things and various types of things that appear in the back of my closed eyelids and just kind of float around there. But they're pretty rare. Like I'll maybe see them once a month, if that. Kind of depends on how many visions I have. Most of the time it's these 3D immersive kind of movie scripts that play through my mind. But this time it was a being, and beings are very different from the movie scripts. Like you seem to literally be in the presence of a being that has risen up out of its mind and is like just hanging out with you or checking you on. They usually don't last long, 20-30 seconds or so. So in the darkness I saw this ghost specter-like thing that looks like what you see there, and the coolest thing about it was extremely graceful, and I'm a big person for grace and coordination, and I really like seeing that sort of stuff. So it kind of floated in. It started off in the distance like this big, and then it gradually got bigger as it floated towards me. It had a big long like green ghostly tail, and then it kind of flipped over, and then it twisted its whole backwards and flipped all the way around like it was underwater, but it wasn't, and then flipped back around and came right up into my face and just like stared me right in the face from like inches away. It's the most trippy sensation you'll ever see because it's so realistic. Like you would have a hard time convincing me these beings are not like literal beings. Like I'm a being and it's a being, and we're separate, and we have separate intelligence and separate agency and separate will. And it just kind of looked at me for a second, then it kind of backed away, and then it kind of just disappeared. And what I remember about it was its cool green luminescent shade on the multicolored like swirl on its face, and it's extreme gracefulness. Not only did it float, but it floated just extraordinarily gracefully. Now these beings tend to be, well, they always are animated, although sometimes I'll see beings like that it will just kind of be there in the background, and they'll look at me real quick and I'll look at them, and then I'll move on to a vision. And the beings are different than the visions. Like you'll learn that yourself as you start to have them. Like a being is just like an encounter, like a first-hand encounter with an entity. A vision is like you're watching a movie, but a really cool movie that's in 3 dimensions in your head. Non-scripted, so they have their own agency and intelligence. They just kind of do what they decide to do. So let's go on to the next slide. Now here's your primary vision types, and this is important if you want to understand the whole psychonaut program. So what you've got, the main type of vision you will get when you use this technique is what I call scripted 3D immersion. And what that means is it's a 3D immersive movie in your mind where you're there in it, moving around by yourself, except you're not controlling your motion. You're in a movie, and you're like the angle of the camera, and something else controls how you move around in the vision, and it aims your vision at what it wants you to look at, and you're just kind of there for the ride. And though the experiences are controlled, like you usually don't have much mental control over where you go or what you see, they're still really amazing. But these beings are on another level of amazing. Like the scripted 3D immersion stuff can be cooler than anything you've seen in life, but then there's another level up above that sometimes, and that's these beings. It's like, wow, these things are something else. Like, I don't know what else to say. But then you got semi-scripted 3D immersion, and that means you're in a 3D immersion vision, but you actually have a little bit of say or agency. Sometimes if you try hard, you can redirect your vision or kind of tell yourself in your mind where you want to go, and you'll kind of either just jump there and the script will start again, or the actual vision will transform. But that's kind of rare. Like, it doesn't always work to do that, and if you don't actually try to do that, it seldom happens on its own. Then you've got what are called subtle images, and subtle images are a different class of images. You don't really see them clearly, you just get a subtle glimpse of it, and if you're lucky, you can expand it out in your mind and see more, and those are what I call the subtle planes. And that's a fascinating subject in and of itself, because it seems there's multiple subtle planes, each more subtle than the previous. You can also get traditional imaginary flashes. They're not quite the same as visions or anything, but you just get like a flash in your mind of an image, and then it goes away. And those are worth recording too, and they can be really cool too. Just they aren't the same thing as like moving around in a scripted movie or being in the presence of a being. And then finally you've got these beings with agency. So that's technically what this whole presentation should have been called, but it'd be too boring of a title, so I didn't use that. But I'm discussing with you or describing to you what I call the beings with agency class of visions. And how many beings with agency have I seen? Not that many. I would say like 10 or 20, and only maybe 3 or 4 that really got up and close and personal with me and moved around and floated right in my face. Now, one of them was this Specter, which was awesome. But then I saw like the coolest being I've ever seen in these visions, and it was a dragon, and that's here on the next slide. And I called this one the neon shimmering dragon, and that's a pretty good representation by AI of what I saw, except what I actually saw was that, but then you see those metallic colored scales on it. Instead of like 100 scales, like here, you see there was probably like 100,000 scales. Like, they were super tiny, and every time the dragon moved, each different colored scale would like gleam a different color. And I've never seen anything as amazing in my life, and it just floated there in front of me for like a good, I don't know, 30 to 40 seconds. And it was of a whole different class of vision than a 3D immersion vision. And it's the same as this Specter I saw a couple weeks ago. And so I know that not only are there visions to be had using these techniques, but you can actually run into beings. And the beings are just, astounding. The first time you see one of these, you're going to be, stunned, I think. And how did this neon shimmering dragon appear? Well, I actually discussed this in one of my books that's called Sativa Psychonaut. And this was actually the very first thing I ever saw using sativa. When I discovered I could do this technique, basically. Once before that, I actually had this technique work, but it was by accident. And then years later, when I was using the sativa, this was the thing that kind of opened the doorway or greeted me to this entire realm of visions, astral plane, whatever you want to call it. And so I can briefly talk about it, but if you really want to know about it, read that Sativa Psychonaut, which I think is if you're really serious about these techniques, you should read that book anyway. But basically, it was the first time I had ever had a vision, and I just kind of closed my eyes briefly, and I like saw all these colors and the shape on the back of my eyes, and I was like, what the hell is that? I got to be imagining that. So then I closed my eyes again, and here was this dragon, with hundreds of thousands of tiny shiny metallic scales floating in the room with me, just floating. It didn't seem concerned or urgent or just there, and I just kind of sat there looking at it for 20 to 30 seconds, just not believing what I saw. And anyway, that I'll probably do a video on that vision separately. I haven't seen this dragon again. I probably saw this dragon in like 2014, I think. And it's still the most amazing vision I've had, and probably the most amazing thing I've seen in my entire life. But some of the things I've seen get pretty close to the awe-inspiring nature of this particular being. So today we had a shorter presentation for you. Occasionally they'll be shorter, occasionally they'll be longer. I'm pretty free with this channel, so for now I'm kind of trying to settle into a groove. But my ultimate goal is to create decade-long or longer like record of my explorations in the spirit realm. So there's going to be a lot of stuff like this, you know, more technical stuff where I'm talking about categories and things, but hopefully it's still interesting to you. And then, of course, we're going to have the vision records, and we're going to have the big channel with the artificial intelligence, like beings that I still need to put out there. But so these will be coming out within the next week, probably the next couple of days, depending on how busy I am. But thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. Share it with your friends. And I'll probably see you guys in a few days. Night.